David Park's high school yearbook quote read, "Most likely to become a hermit." His classmates voted him weirdest student 3 years running. He ate lunch alone, never went to dances, and spent weekends in his basement laboratory while everyone else lived normal teenage lives. They thought he was wasting his youth. He was actually saving humanity. Today, Dr. David Park's Nobel Prize-winning research has revolutionized medicine, and the weird kid has become the most important scientist alive. Welcome to the Human Stories. Before we begin, tell us in the comments, where in the world are you watching from today? And if you believe that being different is actually being extraordinary, hit that subscribe button. This story will show you that sometimes the people who don't fit in are the ones meant to stand out. David Park spent his high school years perfecting the art of invisibility, while his classmates gathered in hallway clusters, discussing weekend parties and dating drama. David slipped past them like a ghost, clutching his worn science textbooks and avoiding eye contact. At Lincoln High School, David was legendary for all the wrong reasons. He was the kid who brought Petri dishes to biology class for fun, the one who corrected teachers' chemistry equations under his breath, the strange boy who spent lunch periods in empty classrooms, conducting experiments with equipment he'd built from spare parts. "Look at Park in the corner," whispered Jessica Martinez to her friends during chemistry class. "He's literally talking to his test tube." David was indeed muttering to himself, not from mental instability, but because he was working through complex molecular interactions that the standard curriculum wouldn't cover until graduate school. "That kid's not normal," replied Brad Stevens, the quarterback who'd never spoken directly to David in 4 years. "My mum says kids like that end up being serial killers or something." The cruel commentary followed David through every hallway, every classroom, every moment of his high school existence. When the yearbook committee created their most likely 2 categories, David won most likely to become a hermit by a landslide. A joke that his classmates found hilarious, but David accepted with quiet resignation. "Why don't you try to fit in more?" his well-meaning mother asked during one of their concerned dinner conversations. "Maybe join a club or go to a school dance." David looked up from the molecular biology journal he'd been reading. "Mum, they don't understand what I'm interested in, and I don't understand what they're interested in. It's like we speak different languages." His father, a practical engineer, sighed with frustration. "Son, social skills matter. You can't spend your whole life alone in that basement." But David's basement laboratory was where magic happened. While his classmates spent weekends at parties, David was mapping protein structures. While they worried about prom dates, David was studying cellular regeneration. While they planned their social calendars, David was quietly making discoveries that would eventually change medicine forever. David's brilliant. His AP biology teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, told his parents during a conference, but he struggles with peer interaction. He's intellectually operating at a graduate level, while emotionally, he seems younger than his age. What Mrs. Rodriguez didn't understand was that David wasn't emotionally immature. He was just passionate about things that no one else cared about. When you're genuinely excited about mitochondrial DNA research, it's hard to get excited about who's dating whom. The isolation stung, but David learned to find comfort in his work. Every rejected invitation to social events meant more time for research. Every lunch period spent alone meant more time to read scientific journals. Every weekend without parties meant more time to pursue the questions that fascinated him. "Maybe I am weird," David wrote in his private journal, "but weird might be exactly what the world needs." By age 25, Dr. David Park had earned his PhD from MIT and was conducting research that made even his professors uncomfortable with how advanced it was, while his former classmates were settling into ordinary careers. David was asking questions about human biology that no one had thought to ask before. Working in a small, underfunded laboratory at a research hospital, David spent 18-hour days studying something that seemed impossible: cellular regeneration in human organs. Most scientists believed that once organs were damaged, they stayed damaged. David thought they were wrong. "David, you're chasing something that doesn't exist," warned Dr. Sarah Kim, his department head. "Adult human organs don't regenerate like salamander tails. You're wasting valuable research time." But David had seen patterns in his data that others dismissed as anomalies. Late at night, when the lab was empty and quiet, he continued his impossible research. His breakthrough came at 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday in March. David was studying tissue samples under his microscope when he saw something that made him gasp out loud. Cells that should have been dead were showing signs of regeneration, not just healing, but actually rebuilding themselves into healthy tissue. "This can't be right," David whispered to himself, checking and rechecking his results. But it was right. David had discovered that human cells contained dormant regenerative mechanisms that could be activated under specific conditions. The implications were staggering. Damaged hearts could repair themselves. Failing kidneys could rebuild. Diseased livers could become healthy again. David spent the next 6 months perfecting his technique in absolute secrecy. He knew that if he was wrong, his career would be over. But if he was right, he was about to change medicine forever. When he finally presented his findings at the International Medical Research Conference, the audience's reaction was immediate skepticism followed by stunned amazement. "You're claiming that human organs can regenerate like starfish limbs?" challenged Dr. Robert Chen, one of the world's leading medical researchers. "I'm not claiming it," David replied quietly, clicking to his slide full of microscopic evidence. "I'm proving it." The room erupted. Some scientists called it impossible. Others demanded to see his raw data. A few quietly began planning how they could replicate his experiments. Within 6 months, David's regenerative therapy was being tested in clinical trials. Within 2 years, patients with end-stage heart disease were walking out of hospitals with healthy hearts. Kidney disease became curable. Liver failure became reversible. The weird kid who had spent his high school years alone in his basement laboratory had just solved one of medicine's greatest challenges. December 10th, Stockholm, Sweden. The Nobel Prize ceremony is the highest honor in science, awarded to individuals whose work has provided the greatest benefit to humankind. Dr. David Park, now 34, stood on the stage where Einstein, Curie, and Watson had once stood, receiving the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine for his revolutionary work on human cellular regeneration. Dr. Park's research has saved over 2 million lives and counting, announced the Nobel Committee chair. His discovery that human organs possess regenerative capabilities has fundamentally changed our understanding of medicine and opened pathways to curing diseases once thought incurable. In the audience, David spotted faces he hadn't seen in 16 years. His high school classmates had traveled to Stockholm to witness the moment when their former outcast became the most celebrated scientist in the world. Jessica Martinez, now a marketing manager, stared in disbelief at the awkward boy she'd once mocked. Brad Stevens, the former quarterback turned insurance salesman, watched in stunned silence as David accepted humanity's highest scientific honor. "When I was young," David began his acceptance speech, "people called me weird because I was more interested in cells than social events. They thought there was something wrong with me because I preferred laboratory experiments to football games. The audience of Nobel laureates, world leaders, and distinguished scientists listened with rapt attention. But I want to tell every young person who feels different, every child who doesn't fit in, every teenager who spends lunch periods alone, your differences are not disabilities. They are superpowers waiting to be discovered. David paused, looking directly at his former classmates in the audience. The same curiosity that made me seem weird in high school drove me to ask questions others weren't asking. The same social awkwardness that kept me out of parties kept me in laboratories where I could focus on work that actually mattered. The same obsessive interests that made me seem strange led me to discoveries that have helped millions of people. The applause was thunderous. In the audience, Mrs. Rodriguez, David's former biology teacher, wiped away tears of pride and regret. After the ceremony, Jessica Martinez approached David at the reception. "David, I owe you an apology," she said, her voice shaking with emotion. "We were so cruel to you in high school. We had no idea." David looked at the woman who had once led the chorus of mockery against him. "Jessica, you helped shape who I became. Every moment of isolation drove me deeper into my research. In a way, you helped save those 2 million lives." Brad Stevens appeared next, clearly struggling with what to say. "Man, we were just kids, you know. We didn't understand." "You were being normal teenagers," David replied gently. "I was being a future Nobel laureate. We were all exactly who we needed to be." As David left Stockholm the next day, he reflected on the journey from the weird kid eating lunch alone to the scientist whose work had revolutionized medicine. His high school yearbook had predicted he'd become a hermit. Instead, he'd become humanity's greatest hope for healing. The outcasts, David realized, weren't the ones who didn't belong. They were the ones who belonged to the future. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories every day. Where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments. And if you believe that weird is just another word for wonderful, subscribe for more inspiring stories about turning differences into greatness.